trying to extrapolate experiment results is a fool's errand, right? Data's too fuzzy. So if you can't assign long-term value to an experiment, how do you actually demonstrate that the experimentation program has value? Well, let's discuss that today. Welcome to the Treachery of Data podcast, the companion podcast to the CRO Roundtable, a bite-sized chunk of content summarizing one of the topics that we discussed last week. Okay, so if you can't extrapolate experiment results, how do you say, oh, running experiments does actually have value, right? One of the things there is talking about insights. So what do you learn from the experiments and what does that result in? These are things that we call, insights. And there's what you can classify them in a sort of a couple different ways, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, you can have behavioral insights, like for instance, a test. You ran a test and you saw some interesting things that users did as a result of a variation, interesting changes in behavior.
Neat.
Not necessarily that they led to conversion rate, that it was a win or whatever, but something interesting that happened from your test. And other ones are kind of like more related to actual conversion goals. Like you can say, we did this and we increased conversion, or we did this and we increased this metric. We did this, it reduced this metric. And kind of like seeing all the connectors between, areas of the site, pages of the site, the sections of the site, and what they actually do. What's the elasticity of a component, of changing some text in a component versus changing something somewhere else, for instance. Yeah, and what conversion levers are working, etc. So these are
Right.
all different
Y-
types.
So these basically tie into assigning KPIs on your experiments, right? You have user behavior goals and business metric goals, and those goals lead to same kind of insights, right? There's matching parity down the line there.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it could be even something that from me from a technical perspective as well. There could be some insights learned from then. Like for instance, we worked on this specific area of the site, and it turned out to be a nightmare because of all these technical dependencies or whatever. So there could be some technical insights as well to do with the actual test related stuff. We probably won't be touching on that so much, but more about, like you said, the things that are inherent to the experiment goals uh, and stuff like that.
Right. And so like it's not necessarily de-emphasizing or devaluing like, oh, this experiment resulted in this lift, but not necessarily being so lift centric or lift focused of like,
Mm.
like not perceiving CRO as a quote unquote growth hack or ROI driver or something like that. Like, yes, testing and experimentation does lead to benefit, but you're not only specifically chasing wins, right?
Yeah,
You're
yeah.
each individual test, you're trying to look for insight that result, and that insight should be actionable in
Mhm.
some way. I mean, like, and this also ties into like pre-mortems talking about like, if we get a particular result, what action will we take as a result of that? And then actually performing that action,
Right.
right?
What
And
does it mean that something happened?
yes, what is the consequence?
Yeah.
Yeah. And actually writing those things down and maybe like emphasizing like amount of actions taken as results of tests. And actions can also be avoidance in nature as well. Like we explicitly decided not to do this thing. The action was avoidant rather than it was proactive rather, well, not proactive reactive, but uh yeah, uh mitigation versus explicit action.
Yeah.
Yep. And so an important thing there is creating a framework for actually recording down those insights
Mhm.
and then recording the action, tracking that in some way. Again, test metadata, like recording all of those things so that you can then create meta reports around that. Like, oh, how many actions did we take as a result of testing in a given period or quarter or something like that? Like how many things did we avoid doing? So, how many things did we not make mistakes about? Or how many insights led to additional experiments, right? Because sometimes your action isn't necessarily, oh, this is something that we're explicitly going to do. Like maybe it's, oh, here's something interesting, but we need to do an additional uh, thing beyond that, whether that be engaging in additional research or maybe clear cut running another experiment, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, and is one thing, one way that I like to think of it is it's a process to reframe the experiment program from from being about conversion related and money related, money making machine, to being a decision making process.
Mm-hmm.
So then once you start recording these insights, people start seeing the value of these insights, the actions that it leads to, as you mentioned, the consequences, and all that kind of stuff. Then that kind of becomes a really valuable aspect of experimentation.
Yeah. Well, also building up like that history and sort of a playbook of like, we know not to do this thing for this reason. Like some new hotshot executive comes in or something and is like, we should redesign the website. We should do this, this, and this. And you can point like, here's some research and some experimentation that we did 6 months ago that, ex, pretty concretely proves we should not do that thing. Or, like, or on the flip side of that, hey, maybe that is a really good idea, but we should validate.
Yeah. So what are some of the categories, or like say we've got this insight bank where we're going to be banking all of our insights. It's probably worth just spending a little bit of time on like categorizing the different types of or categories of insights that you could have in there.
Yeah, and this isn't necessarily all inclusive because,
Mhm.
again, frameworks, do something that suits your specific needs. But the sort of the way that I classify them is, um, insights are initiators of a particular action. And at least early on, or, pre-experimentation, like what are the sources of experiment uh, like what are the different types of ideas, and then also what are the different types of actions that can result in them too. So different kinds of insights. Um, the ones that I have are ideas, research, problems, and observations. So ideas are basically someone has thought of something to do, you know, something that they reached through. I don't like they saw something cool on some other website and was like, hey, maybe we should do that or something, right? These are more general ideas. They can come from anywhere. And this is almost even more of a meta classification. And research is obviously like, oh, someone's done a particular research activity and this insight has come out of that, whether they're doing a heuristic audit or a, customer survey, usability study, all the different types of research, right? You have some concrete research action that was taken that's resulted in generating this insight.
So it
Um,
could be user research, or it could be like deep dive into analytics software
mhm.
or something like that, couldn't it?
Yeah,
So it
yeah,
could,
both qualitative and quantitative data
yeah,
sources
yeah.
for both. Yep, exactly. Um, And then problems are things that are concrete issues that are observably having a negative impact. Like, oh, uh, drop off from category to product page is 99%. Which is exceedingly high for our particular expectations. Like generalized e-commerce knowledge would say like you shouldn't have that much of a drop off between like people looking at a category page to go to a product page, right? There's that could potentially indicate a very big issue, right? It's an observable problem that you looked at through analytics. And then observations are things where it's something that you've seen but isn't necessarily a problem. So given that same example, like instead of the drop off being such an extreme number, like maybe it's like 50% or something like that, where it's like it's not terrible, but you think it could be better or something along those lines, right? Where it's not explicitly a problem, but you think there's an opportunity for improving it. And those are sort of at least different ways to classify um, insights or initiators. Can you think of any other? Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, I was just thinking there's probably like correlations as well. Like you could say, like, it seems to be that this is linked to this. Like moving, making this change has some sort of effect. So the two variables are interlinked basically. So that's another type of insight that I like to record. Um, and then in terms of like things from and like I think you mentioned that already with the observations, but audits, audit based ones. So when you run an audit, you kind of like say, well, I know from heuristic sort of information of stuff that I've done in the past that this is probably going to be a problem. Jot that down as an insight as well, and also and again, like one point that I'll get to in a bit too. But before, I know what another really integral part of the insight is like problems. I like to split off at some point as a problem statement. This is something that Shiva sort of mentions a lot in terms of like starting with a problem statement.
Yeah,
I think that
that's basic scientific theory, right? You have
yeah,
problem, hypothesis, et cetera, et cetera.
yeah. So a problem statement, and then so at some point, I usually branch off, and I call them they're basically part type of insight to me, in terms of the way that I categorize them. But one thing I was like, as a side note to all of this, is insights don't have to be stuff that is true at the moment. So basically, you don't
Right.
so basically, they could be ideas, like you said, and then you
What
just
if scenarios?
what ifs, or something that you think like so anybody could come up with an idea. I think this and this are interlinked. So basically, that goes all into the insight bank, and then what happens in the way that you record it is that you provide proof for this insight. So then proof is gathered through any number of experiments, either directly or indirectly. If they prove an insight, then they're kind of linked. So
Well, even before that, like, and to be clear, insight classification, there's lots of different ways to
yeah,
slice that up. Like, we're not being comprehensive here at all, right? Like problems could have their own subset of things where it's like technical issue, bug, uh, like conversion drop off, right? There's lots of different ways to slice that up even further and granular depending on what your objective is for your experimentation program. But even before like saying like oh an insight is explicitly tied to an experiment, like really an experiment is just one potential resulting action from an insight.
yeah,
Like the different types of actions that can result from insights, there's not one single path there either, because some insights, it's like you can look at it and it's like, well, maybe this is like a really straightforward obvious kind of thing, so this is something we should just do. Like, for example, you can get the same example of like a bug on the site. Well, you probably don't want to like run an experiment to see what kind of value you're going to get off of a bug fix. You should probably just fix the bug. especially if it's some sort of mission critical bug. Like, oh, we introduced a bug that's stopping people from adding items to the cart on the website. Well, you don't want to test the fix for that and only deploy it, right? Like run an A/B test where only 50% of the users are actually able to successfully add an item to the cart, right? Like there's such an obvious demand there. It's like, oh, just fix that thing. So like some insights have a direct action of com- complete a task, right?
Yeah, so they're not necessarily it's not necessarily all experiment related. Like another one is
Right.
user testing, user research, surveys. So they could lead
Exactly,
to
right. Sometimes an insight leads to
a
research,
survey.
especially those what if scenarios. Like
Yeah,
those are much more likely to lead to some sort of research because then that bolsters like the need to run the experiment.
yeah. So so let's talk a bit about ways of recording insights then. How like we've mentioned the value of them and all the different types of categories of them and how they should be interlinked with user research, with experiments, with all of these other kind of things. So, but how do we make those connections? And just as a starting point, just a shout out to Sean David, who's created like the Exos, because I think with
XOS, Experimentation
X,
Operating System. It's an
XOS, yeah,
acronym, yes.
yeah. So, which is something that anybody can. Has he released it yet properly?
I don't know if it's publicly available. You can reach out to him and ask
Yeah,
for permission to view it.
yeah,
But essentially, like it's as with any experimentation program thing, you should be tracking all of your information in some sort of database at the very basic level using a spreadsheet or something, or getting more advanced and starting to do work in like Airtable or building out your own database or something, depending on your
yeah.
access to resources and technical
So, for
know-how.
people, I'd say for doing spreadsheets, I think move away from spreadsheets
That's the
because
baby step,
yeah,
yes.
that's the baby step. Because now what we're talking about is we're talking about relational databases in that
Right, right.
context.
You
You've
have your
got
insight database,
yeah,
and you have to align that with your experiment database.
yeah. So imagine like you've got an experiment result, and then in the field for that experiment result, you want to say link an insight, and then pick an insight, link it, pick another insight, link it, and then that way you can say, oh, from this experiment has directly
Yeah.
relational to these insights, and same again with
I
user
was gonna say,
research,
yeah,
and
it's a
same again with
two-way street of like this
yeah,
experiment resulted in these insights, right? So you're creating all these different flywheels, like,
yeah,
and it's not just insight experiment database, right? There's
yeah.
there's action database as well, and all three, and there's maybe even other things in there as well, depending on what you're dealing with
Yeah.
specifically.
And it's really nice to do it that way because an Airtable is like the way that I do it, and I think the way
I
that
do
you.
too. Yeah.
So having all the insights in a specific table, and then seeing the number of experiments or some experiments or stuff linked to that insight, and seeing the lack of stuff linked to insights, and all of that is really really useful information that can lead to more ideas and just kind of doing like a roll up in terms of, hey, this is what we've learned in the last 3 months if you do a quarterly wrap up or whatever.
You're creating that paper trail of like like this thing led to this thing led to this thing which led back to this, and you're enabling yourself to almost map out like all the different branching pathways of possibility for
Mm.
potential courses of action that you've taken or not taken.
Yeah. And in that way, what that does is as well, say you've got a test win and it was a big win, instead of like focusing on that as a singular test, as being, oh yeah, this test, give that test a cookie. You think about it in terms of all
Give
of
that test a cookie.
you think about it in terms of all of the other tests that kind of led to that test, that were the parents of that test, or relatives of that test. So yeah, it kind of gets the thinking away from singular test mentality, and you start to think about, oh, you see how these other tests are interlinked. How this research was interlinked with this, and this was interlinked with that, and then this led to the conversion increase. And then it starts to people start to really perk up about the value of insights at that point, and kind of like delving. You could spend ages delving into it, depending on how much data you got, obviously. But yeah,
Mhm. Yeah. Well, and yeah, there's also there a piece there of like applying prioritization to each of the different things, right?
right.
Because depending on the scale and size and access to resources that the experimentation program has, right? Like you're probably not going to be able to action on every single potential insight
Yeah,
that comes in. So you're going to have to create some sort of prioritization framework there as well. Of like, okay, which ideas are we going to, or which insights are we going to like work on, take an action on first, right? So
right.
there's some part, and it could be that, insights that were generated off of prior actions are given more weight because there's a known thing there of like weight, like, this insight was a result of three different experiments and two components of research. So there's more meat on the bone there to dig into and action
Mm.
upon versus like this idea that is generated whole cloth out of like, oh, I have an idea for a thing.
Yeah. And in terms of like the, I was going to say something, but it's completely left my mind.
Don't you
It's
hate when that
a big
happens?
crap. So here's another thing that's a useful thing to do is so reconciling why did we run this experiment in the first place, and so then we know based on that result that uh, maybe it wasn't the insight, it hasn't been validated, but perhaps it was the execution that wasn't quite right. So separating out the hypotheses from the insights. So that's an important distinction to make. Like the hypotheses are not insights. Insights lead to hypotheses, which lead to
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, a hypothesis is explicitly one-to-one tied to an experiment. Like, the hypothesis is a core component of the experiment. An insight can lead to an hypothesis, but an insight in and of itself is not a hypothesis.
yeah, and
Yeah,
also
that's
like
that's actually a very, very good point.
yeah, yeah. So keeping those things separate is really valuable because too many times I've had the scenario where oh hey, we tried this and it failed, therefore let's nip this at the bud, sort of thing. Well, hey, this was just a hypothesis that was brought from some insight, so why nip the entire insight at the bud? Because maybe the execution, and I'd go even a step further to say like hypothesis and execution are even separate things, because you could have a hypothesis and then maybe the execution isn't quite right, so then
Mhm.
you could try some different executions of that, or maybe it was the way that the insight led to the hypothesis was not the correct sort of like the execution wasn't right there. So maybe try a different type of hypothesis to then lead off to experiments. So
I
there's
have a really good example of this that is something that I actually did, right? Like, one insight can lead to multiple hypotheses, right? I had a test or an insight where we were looking at, um, client had a drop off in their average order value, and they were wondering what was up. So they were like, like, we're getting the same amount of orders in, but we're getting less dollars per order. So we want to investigate potential ways to improve AOV. My initial hypothesis was, oh, we're not doing a good job of presenting upsells. on the product page. And it was a sporting goods retailer. So our first hypothesis was, if we add a bundling feature to the product page, it'll allow it'll encourage users to add multiple items to their cart at the same time. So like if you're buying, say, uh, a baseball bat, you can also buy, a baseball glove and a baseball at the same time. Or like, if you're buying running shoes, you can also, you can like just one click also buy running socks as well, or some kind of like, complementary paired product feature, bulk add capability, right? So we ran a test, and users didn't really interact with it much at all. So the hypothesis was disproven of like, oh, bundling isn't beneficial. But the initial insight problem still remains of like, we want to improve AOV. So now so I had to run a follow-up test of like, okay, maybe the product page isn't the right place for that. Maybe we need to do it on the cart page instead.
Mm.
So, quick add features like that onto the cart page. Or it's like, oh, if you have, shoes in your cart and you're looking at the cart page here, how about adding some socks as well? And you can, just one click, also put those socks in your cart directly on the cart page itself without having to view the, go and find the socks and what have you. That was the actual solution.
Yeah, and I've got that's a really good one. And I've had one where it's basically a value proposition failed to give an uplift, but moving the value proposition somewhere else and part of the flow actually worked. So
Changing
basically,
the text or changing the
no,
messaging versus changing the location.
yes. So basically, the messaging was pretty much the same, but it was just shifted to another location, and it worked better based on that location, based on part of the flow, basically. So yeah, so the
So
value,
it wasn't an issue with like the messaging itself. It was an issue with the prominence of the messaging. Like users weren't seeing it, so they weren't being keyed into the value
or
proposition.
rather, it was the relevance of that messaging. So basically, that
Mhm.
at that point in time, they
Ah,
weren't
okay. On that
already.
point in the journey, they
Yeah,
weren't.
at that point in the flow, they weren't ready to see that value proposition. So kind of like, stating your value too early can sometimes, lead to. I mean, yeah, you obviously have to time it, but there is a right time that it becomes really relevant to them. They say, "Hey, I have a house and I need to have things delivered." So at some point, they think about the delivery, and then having some value proposition tied to delivery might have a much better weight than if they were to arrive on the site and get told about delivery as being at that point they might not even be thinking of it in that sort of term, in those sort of terms. So yeah, there's like we said, like there's different executions which of the same hypothesis which could lead to
It's
different
not a linear path from like
you know,
insight to hypothesis to experiment to result back, right?
yeah, it's
There's
slow
a there's a
message.
one to many relationship at each potential stage there.
Yeah, yeah. Which is why it's so useful to have like a database.
Separate databases for each
Yeah,
stage.
and have them all or separate tables and have them all interlinked and stuff like
Right.
that. So then you could reference them, you could draw out like like dashboards based on them, see how my conversion levers are doing or stuff like see how
It
tests and
it'd be
stuff.
really cool if someone did like you took that database and someone could like graphically map out like a decision tree.
Yeah, yeah. In fact, this is one of the things I was thinking about for developing on the tool, the UI tool from the data from Airtable is kind of showing the journey that an experiment goes through, like all of the links between the
The
experiments and all
experiment or an
of
insight?
the experiments and the insights. So
Yeah,
basically, you have
yeah.
all of the experiments and all of the insights, all of the user research as connected.
Yeah.
and
All the
how
different
your
branching paths.
yeah,
Like
all the
this
different brands.
experiment led to 2 insights, and this one was less valuable. So we went we followed this path instead, and that led to 3 other insights, which led to 7 right, like
Yeah,
showing the sort of
showing that tree would be
family
super.
tree kind of, yeah.
I think it could probably be a little bit overwhelming for
Oh,
certain,
yeah.
but it'd be really interesting visualization to see. So, but yeah, so yeah,
Well, if you have any questions or feedback, you can always talk to me and Iqbal face to face at the CRO Roundtable every Friday at conversionworld.co. If you're not there, you should sign up. It's totally free and everybody's invited. If you're shy or you don't like speaking, you can always connect with us on LinkedIn. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.